Welcome back to Goaldigger right here on LinkedIn Live. I'm Cate Luzio, founder and CEO of Luminary. The summer is always an interesting time for Goaldigger and any, I think, shows, especially on a Friday. But I had the opportunity to ensure we had two incredible guests today, and it had been rescheduled from a little while ago. So hopefully for those of you that are listening in now or tuning in later, you will get a lot out of the next 30 minutes because I'm delighted to have incredible Luminary members, but also the CEO and CSO of Opportunity Lab, Mark and Anna. And before I go into kind of a little bit about you guys, Mark and Anna would love to hear about what you guys are building, why this is so important. And one of the things that I've learned about Opportunity Lab, and the audience will hear about it, is Goaldigger is about finding your voice. And I feel like you all are working with companies to really also help them find their voice as they evolve and transition. So that's my little kind of how I've tied it into Goaldigger. But Mark, I'll turn it over to you and Anna.
Thanks, Cate, and welcome, Anna, my partner for many years at Opportunity Lab. So I want to just share a quick sort of story about how we got to Luminary, because it does tell, I think, the audience about our voice, why we at Luminary, why we love Luminary. So quite a few years ago, we were envisioning, this is even before Anna came on, we were envisioning where we would be our next place to be in residence. So we envisioned this incredible space, big space, lights, plants near a park, and it turns out we ended up at the Center for Social Innovation, where we were founding members from 2013 all the way to the end of the first year of the pandemic. And so the reason I'm saying to that is we had a real clear vision. And where we ended up at Luminary, we had a very similar visioning session. And turns out that Anna was working at a co-working space in New Jersey. And as we were starting to vision, she said, there's this organization called Luminary that is partners with this small co-working space where I have been hanging out.
It was
So
Coco and Summit.
So I said, well, that sounds really interesting. And it's specifically for women to have a safe, open, kind of entrepreneurial space. And we went there, and we just fell in love with it. And, the reason that I'm telling that story is because it really speaks to the interdependence that I think we really embrace at Opportunity Lab. And we really help our clients embrace the fact that we are no longer separate entities doing our own thing. We are absolutely interdependent on one another. And so that's what I kind of want to start it out to let the audience know that Luminary really is a place where you get to meet incredible people that you wouldn't ordinarily even know existed, find out about businesses, and of course, feel comfortable to really vision what your future is.
First of all, thank you. I love that. And it's funny. I don't know if I've told you this, Mark. I say that quite often. So in my former life as a banker for, close to 20 years, the people that I meet at Luminary, 99% of them I would never have met in my former life. And that's not only because I surrounded myself around bankers and in the industry of financial services, and there are plenty of those at Luminary. It's opened my world to so many new perspectives, so many different kinds of companies. It's also really unbelievable just to see what companies are building and who they're employing, right? So, and then the founder piece and entrepreneur. But so I love that you said that, because I think that's also been my experience. And I don't think I actually thought about that when I started the company. But as a member of the community, even though I'm the founder, that's what I experienced. So, but it's great to have you both. And Anna, I love the connection with the Coco. They've been a partner of ours since they opened. We have now a partner network of about 15 women-centric spaces around the US, and the Coco, obviously pretty close to New York. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, really fun. And I'm really connecting to what you just said. So my background is also in finance. And I do find this kind of added benefit of the diversity of the community that your network kind of morphs into, in these spaces. It just, it's a really, really awesome kind of, maybe not necessarily a goal you set out from
Yeah.
the get-go, making the switch, but finding yourself in this, in this environment is just really, really special.
So let's talk about that environment as far as what you guys are doing with and the unbelievable work that you're doing with companies. I've had the benefit of sitting down with Mark on a couple of occasions and learning about it, reading the book. But because we are really in a unique point in time for the country and the world, right? We've just been working from home, working remotely, whatever we want to call it, the great resignation. You've got a lot of brands that and companies that are trying to kind of figure out who they are going forward, what's their brand identity, who they are, who do they show up for, from both their customers as well as employees. And you really, as an organization, as a company, are helping leaders really build for that sort of next evolution of where we're at today.
Yeah, Kate, we are, and I wanted to share a specific example of some of the work that we have been doing, like literally now, and it's very different than what we were doing a few years ago. Even though we've been kind of evolving, as many conscious businesses have. So we have been working with a company in California that is in the electrical supply business for probably about 7 or 8 years, and then at the end of 2018, the way that they were wanting to relate to us changed, and we decided to pause our relationship with them. But I'm still very, very close friends with the two owners. These are founders who actually became best friends when they were 15,
Mm.
immigrants from the Ukraine, way back in the 80s. And so their partnership had reached a point, which I found out back this January, where it was about to implode. And these are two guys that loved each other, cared about each other, but they had not really stepped back from the businesses that they built and what they wanted for quite a few years. And I said, why don't we just step back and decide what is it you actually want from your life? And based on what you want from your life, what do you want from your partnership? And based on what you want from your partnership, what kind of business do you actually want to build? So we actually had them in the first phase, which we call fulfillment, that Anna and I kind of designed together. Like, what is at the end of your life, what do you want the eulogy to be said about you? Right. So we said, like, your life is finite, and what is it actually means right now? And we had each of them do that. And it was so powerful for them to begin with the end in mind. And then when they shared it with each other in phase two, which was alignment, they literally started crying because they saw how much they cared about each other in their business, but they hadn't stepped back with all of the busyness of those years that were so frenetic to decide what their values were now, which had shifted quite a bit. And so the alignment phase has gone really, really well because they really defined humanity and the caring that they have for the people that work for them and their customers in a way they hadn't really understood it before. So our mission is to build organizations, resilient organizations with shared abundance. And we feel like that process that we developed is really helping people do that from a deeper level than ever before.
I love the word shared abundance, right? It's not often used in, I would say, corporate America, right? So this idea of, I don't know if it's overused yet, but conscious capitalism and really thinking about also the impact. And we hear a lot the buzzwords around social impact and ESG, but just kind of tying it back to just these two founders and what their company was going through. I love that. Anna, you talked about coming from financial services, right? And kind of more, this is more, a little bit more personal. What made you switch?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, a couple of things. My journey has sort of been centered around, I think, helping people through change.
Mm.
Um, and what I see come up in people during difficult times is more of that humanity.
Mhm.
So corporate environments are great at maybe masking or not focusing on humanity as much, or at least in the past they were kind of structured that way. And the change I'm seeing now in the work we're doing with Opportunity Lab is really bringing the two together. That's why like personal fulfillment and your sort of values and morals and things you actually want to get out of your life need to be reflected in your work in order to, really have an impact personally for yourself, as well as kind of as a legacy for the company or department or wherever you're at. So um you know working in finance, I originally kind of got into it as a practical choice, and I don't know, I was good in math, and then it went into this exploration of, okay, how are people dealing with change? We worked through a financial crisis. I actually happened to be at Lehman Brothers
Oh,
when the financial crisis unfolded, and then, as you can imagine, there was a lot of change
yeah,
management type work and strategy work that took place once Lehman was acquired by Barclays, and there's a lot of integration happening and all kinds of, obviously, industry changes. And so that humanity aspect of, how do we actually navigate things, and how do we align what we do at work with, what matters to people,
yeah,
what matters to our society, what matters to our world and planet, and just sort of bigger things than day to day, kind of minute activities is I feel really came to life, through this crisis.
yeah.
And so, I ended up doing more of a like COO internal consulting strategy work at Barclays. And then it
Mhm.
was just a natural next step to kind of fully dive into, this space outside of being limited to just the financial services. And the journey continues. I ended up actually pursuing more of a leadership coaching role and kind of getting trained there and doing more coaching work, which like dives even deeper into that personal journey of each leader, that we work with.
Yeah. So what I love how that the sort of the connect the dots how you got there, and I think now more than ever, right? That leaders are searching for, um, I don't know, help, support, guidance. Mark, what's the biggest thing you're hearing right now from whether it's the companies that you work with, or even just that and are aligned with from that creating conscious brands and companies, but more importantly, leaders. What are you hearing right now? Because there's a lot of turmoil, and you heard it on LinkedIn. I think I did it 3 days ago. I can't remember when I posted it. We've been talking so much about the Great Resignation, but with a potential recession, with inflation going up, with interest rates rising, people are going to need jobs, and we're already starting to see layoffs, and we're already starting to see expense freezes. And so I think the world is going to change drastically over the next 3 months of what we've seen for the past year. But would love to hear a little bit from both of you about what you're hearing from your clients and the friends of OpLab.
Yeah, okay, that's a lot, a lot to digest. But when you think about change, right? So when we have to change the way we do our bodies, our health, the way we move, when nature changes, right? Change requires being open, being flexible, right? Kind of unfreezing things that are tight and constricted, right?
Mm-hmm.
But companies, what they know is, well, when things look tight, we're going to contract, we're going to tighten, we're going to shrink, we're going to kind of fold in on ourselves, which maybe that worked decades ago. But right now, really, it actually change requires being more open and being more inclusive of people who understand what's actually happening in your organization.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you know that Jamie Dimon and David Solomon and Elon Musk have been insisting, demanding, requiring people show up in a physical building,
Yep.
4 days a week, 5 days a week. Well, good luck to you. But on March 1st, when Goldman Sachs was supposed to have all the people back, 50% said, no,
No.
I'm not coming back, right? Even Apple, which you think of as a more innovative, more open company, they wanted people to come back 3 days a week, but the 3 days they wanted to come back, which I believe were Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, which didn't allow any, maybe a long weekend, but not much else in between. So we are finding that leaders that are really going to evolve and transcend in this particular time are going to be wanting to know what their people actually think and give up that command and control from the white male mindset of I can control when you work, where you work, how you work. Well, I don't want to do that. We don't do that at Opportunity Lab. We talk about what do we have to do, who is available to do it. Every week we have a discussion on bandwidth. What is your bandwidth on, and what is my bandwidth? What are you inspired by? What are you troubled by? And through that discussion, we believe we could serve our clients better than trying to figure out what we can control, which isn't nearly as much as we thought it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo Mark's comments, and that, it's interesting. There was already, I think before the pandemic, there was already such a push to really reevaluate kind of the status quo, for lack of a better word, in business, where newer generations, like newer managers kind of rising in organizations, really questioning, what the priorities are, what the culture in organizations is like, and what they would like to focus on instead, which is maybe more balance, again, more consciousness around the environment, around diversity, around just the type of environment at work, and having more autonomy or providing more autonomy for employees. And then once the pandemic hit, it just sort of just sped up that process. Where now everybody, not just sort of the younger generation or the select few, everyone had to really reevaluate the priorities and find completely new ways of working, including organizations. We talk about this a lot, organizations that were dead set on never having remote work as an option, that 100% remote and are fine and are doing great and are doing better. So I think there's just so much changing that this idea of, okay, let's come up with a better way. Let's let each person find a better way that works for them to be productive and fulfilled and interested and wanting to stay on, and not quit, and wanting to tie their careers with a particular business. It's a really interesting time. And I think it's really inspiring because there's this energy in the air of both leaders and sort of,
employees.
Employees, partners. Everyone is searching for these better ways that are just more human centric.
So with that being said, Anna, though, back to sort of Mark, like you had these CEOs coming out and continue, by the way, and including Elon Musk saying, you'll be fired if you don't come back. This command and control approach, do you think these leaders will change? I'm not picking on any one of them, but do you think they have to change, or will they just continue to run because that's how they've always run things? And many of those leaders that Mark mentioned have been in a position of power in their organization for quite some time.
Okay, I think the stakeholders have way more say than they ever did before. I think shareholders, particularly large organizations, let's say the California State Teachers Association, as one example, has decided what they're absolutely not going to invest in companies that are destroying the planet, as one example. Employees certainly vote very quickly, where they want to work. And a lot of the shortages have been with employees who decide, I don't want to work in an organization that doesn't respect who I am, my autonomy, and so forth. So I'm gonna go back to Luminary because I think this is a very, very perfect example of how you operate a different organization. So when we were negotiating and trying to figure out how we would do this retreat at Luminary, we wanted to do it in a large conference room with some breakout rooms, and also do part of it on the 5th floor, which is the glass ceiling, which is affiliated with Luminary, but handled by a different person, right? So in most organizations, I would be dealing with somebody at the glass ceiling, somebody at Luminary, and I would have to really there was no way to figure out how it would all work, right? So we ended up with Sophie Hackett, one of your wonderful, partnership leaders. She became the person who actually made it almost seamless to figure out how we would do it. And without her, I don't know if we would have figured it out, but it certainly would have been stressful and difficult. And she was like, "All right, I know what the glass ceiling can do. I know what Luminary can do. I know what you want." And it was such a pleasurable experience. And because the way you run your organization, you're not running it into, okay, well, you're in this box and you're in this
Yeah.
box and you can do this and you can't do this. And she was like, all right, what do we need? And how can I make the Luminary glass ceiling ecosystem work for us, which it did. So I think that the way that you run your organization, where you're really focused on your members and your stakeholders rather than the box that your job description puts you in.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously a much smaller company than a SpaceX or a JP Morgan, but I think kind of leading and really on what you were saying too, and Mark, there's the employee view, they're the stakeholders, the shareholders, and I think the voice of the client is becoming more and more important as well. Right. So when a client sees what a company is doing, and by the way, clients and customers have many choices, whether that's a bank, whether that's a community or a space, they are going to start making demands, if you will, around what they want to see from the organizations that they do business with. We're already seeing that. And I'm seeing that just in my network of people around how clients are, the questions that customers and clients are asking of the organizations that they work with, about their boards, about who their leadership are, what is their return to work, what is their childcare policy, flexibility, which I think that really puts companies and leaders in a position where if they're not listening, they better start.
Yeah, and everything is very public. Right?
Yes.
So, your feet are to the fire. Like, when leaders sort of say one thing and do something else, it's completely transparent. Everyone can see it and they sort of get called out on it. So, I'm with Mark. I'm hopeful. While of course there is some concentration of wealth and control that remains, there's just so many other things happening to really push this along. And I'm optimistic.
So,
Mark,
Kate, one of the challenges for organizations that want to be more collaborative, want to have shared abundance, is how do you actually know what is happening in your organization
yeah.
and what is happening now, right? So, employee engagement surveys are great. They give you some data. They also do take some time. So some of it may be lagging indicators. We developed this program called Share Lab at the very beginning of the pandemic, where we help companies understand what is actually happening in different departments, different divisions of the organization. So we go in and we ask three questions. Where are you calling from? Assuming that we're doing this virtually, which is a lot of what we do in these particular situations. What is inspiring you? What is troubling you? And we teach our clients how to be able to have these deep listening sessions and find their employees feel cared about, connected, and functioning effectively. And through these Share Lab sessions, we have helped our clients really truly understand what's happening with customers, what's happening with their employees, how the hybrid model is working or not working. And it's just been incredible that you can really get so much information when you really respect the intelligence of the people who work with you.
Yeah. And also really start to empower your people, right? Where they feel there's real skin in the game versus it's just a job.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's super important. And I think it's a reflection, not just in the employee culture, but the sort of that brand culture, the employer brand and the customer brand, and who you want to be known as a leader, but also really embodying that as an organization. I think that's so important. And you guys are certainly super laser focused on that. I know we only have a minute or two left, and these 30 minutes are always so fast. And by the way, the next guest that we're bringing on, Erin Anderson, who runs an organization called Your Brand Networker. I don't know if you guys have met at Luminary, but you need to. As I was thinking about you talking, Mark, and your example, and then I'm thinking about Erin coming on, I'm like, there's a lot, I think, there, because given what she's doing in her company. But I always love to share tips and advice. I mean, obviously, we're going to put up where they can find you it's oplab.com. But as leaders are searching or figuring things out, any advice that the kind of the first thing that they should do as they're in this position, other than obviously go to OpLab and hopefully start to work with you guys?
Talk to other leaders who are looking at this from different perspectives. Talk to women leaders, talk to younger leaders, older leaders, leaders in different parts of the world, different parts of the United States. So we run a community called Opportunity Community that we started also at the very beginning of the pandemic. It's once a month. It's usually the third Thursday of every month. It is on our website. And in that space, you will talk to other leaders and learn some extraordinary things that they're doing, and also share what you're doing, share resources and ideas. We actually did one last week on what could you learn from Ted Lasso about team culture, which was phenomenally interesting. We played a couple of clips from the Ted Lasso series. So I think that's the most concrete advice. Talk to other leaders and share your ideas with them.
I love that. Anna?
Yeah, totally agree with that. I would probably just add the fulfillment piece. It's important to just take the time to reflect on what drives you, what is really at the core, what drives your organization, and start building from there.
Yes, and taking the first step. Well, Mark and Anna, again, thank you guys. First of all, thank you for being part of our community at Luminary. But it's remarkable on what you're doing, and that you started so many years ago versus in the pandemic, just to treat what's been happening. So oplab.com, OPPLAB.com. You can also find them, I think, on the same as far as on social, correct?
Yeah, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram. You pretty much can find us anywhere, but our website will show all those things. Wherever you can find us, we'll be right there, and you can link to all the different ways we connect on social media.
Amazing. Well, thank you both. And I will have a follow-up to make sure I connect you with Erin, who I'm bringing on right after the both of you. Have a great weekend, and I will see you at Luminary.
Looking forward.
Thanks,
Thank
Kate.
you.
Thanks,
Anna.
guys. And hello, Erin.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. So we just had an incredible first episode on this Friday with Mark and Anna from Opportunity Lab, and they were really talking about, Erin, a lot around inclusive leadership, listening to employees, creating the right culture, creating better environments. Obviously, this last 2 years has thrown everybody sort of for a loop as a leader. And as I was thinking about your journey, and certainly what you talk quite a bit about, transition, toxic workplace, all of the things we're going to get into, I thought, wow, I didn't even think about this when I set the both of these sessions up. So we're going to jump into it. And one of the things that I love, Erin, about you is there's no filter, in a good way. I think that was something that drew us together that first time I met you at Luminary. But I'm going to back it up a little bit, and would love for you to tell the audience a little bit about your story, because you are the founder of Your Brand Networker, but that's not what you did for many, many years. This is a relatively newer endeavor. So let's hear a little of your story.
Yeah, of course. So after business school, I got a master's in management, and was always a little bit more on the creative side, loved writing, very social, loved interaction with people, but I did really well in accounting and finance. So I thought that was the route that I should go. So it's not, and here's a side note, that's not always what you're good at, right? It has to be what you're passionate about as well. And so I entered the corporate banking world, but more on the analytical side. So not the relationship side at all, and was spending hours a day in financial models on the credit side and asset-based lending. And after that, I moved to a REIT on their investment side, and was doing commercial real estate. And in both situations, just entered cultures that were toxic, to say the least. My first was verbal, and my second being sexual. And hearing my classmates from business school telling me about their thriving careers and getting promotions and staying at the same organization, which is something that I had really, wanted to do from the beginning. I wasn't somebody that wanted to move organizations. I wanted to work my way up. And I always said I wanted to be a CEO of an organization. I've always wanted to be the leader of different things, no matter if it was in college or in an organization locally, whatever that looked like. I really like bringing people together. But after encountering both those situations, I left in 2019 and entered a pandemic, as we had mentioned. And I'm very type A and was bored quickly and couldn't deal with the hiring freezes. So had very loosely started helping career professionals on the side as a freelance gig while I was doing banking. And then in June 2020, took it full time and entered a workforce that was mostly unemployed, unfortunately, at the time, and was helping them get back up. But instead of just finding a job, it really started to be, well, how can we use this period to our advantage to be something that works in our favor, to be a transition. So not just accepting the first job that comes our way, maybe because it's the highest salary, but really thinking about long term, what role are we going to go to that's going to be sustainable for our career in the future?
Okay, so there's so much there. So
Yeah.
I'm going to park that piece now, that the latter of what you just said, because that's so important, especially now with the great resignation, the great realignment. That's what I'm calling it now, because it is going to change over the next several months if we enter into a recession, and people are going to need jobs and companies are going to cut back on hiring. But your journey, right? You had built this, budding, kind of building your career in finance, had these terrible experiences that really forced you to make a decision on that was not the environment nor the industry that you wanted to continue working for. But that's a really hard decision. And I hear it a lot from people like, I'd love to transition out of what I'm doing and do something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just scared. I don't know what to do. What happens if it doesn't work? From a mindset perspective, how did you get there?
Yeah, so even switching from the corporate banking side to a REIT was a big deal for me, because it was actually, I wanted to do strategy and development long term. And so it was headed in the right direction, but it was, I remember the reason I started banking was they said, if you didn't start it now, then you can't really go into it later. And there's always these things that you hear that it's now or never, and same thing moving forward. And so for me, I was in an interesting period that it was kind of now or never, because you're sitting there in a pandemic on unemployment and thinking about what is the best use of your time. And I was just speaking to somebody earlier about this. In times of crisis, so that's really when a lot of those small businesses were born. And I never considered myself an entrepreneur, but I think the biggest thing mindset perspective wise is I always used to say, well, when I go back to corporate, or if I go back to corporate, and that's really difficult to get out of if you're transitioning to the entrepreneur side. And I just accomplished that this year of really realizing that this is for the long term. But from a career professional standpoint, the biggest thing I tell my clients is that you could always go back if you want to. You're not stuck. You've built years of experience. So it's actually easier for you to go back, if anything, right? It's harder to take the next step. But encouraging them that it is the right step, because this is, when someone says they've hated their career for 20 years, this is where they should be going. It is the right place. So, a lot of it, exactly what you're saying, is a mindset piece of not just positive thinking, but thinking I am worthy of this and I can do this.
So you made this big shift, and I literally can see it in my head. We were sitting down, you were sitting downstairs on the third floor, and I'm kind of walking out, and you introduced yourself, and you stopped, and you shared your story. You were able to kind of have this big mindset shift for yourself that allowed you really to now create your brand networker. So let's talk a little bit about, taking your experience to now starting this company to helping clients. What does in your brand networker, if I am that, I've been in my career for 20 years, I want to get out, I don't know what to do, I'm kind of figuring out. How do you help clients now?
Yeah. So I do it in a lot of different ways because I help both career transitioners as well as organizations that are looking to evolve in a positive direction and with a specific initiative. So for the career transitioner, especially, usually it's about at least 10 years out, but typically it's mid to exec level. And that can look like anybody switching from within marketing. It could be finance to marketing for people that have general business degrees or MBAs. It could be people that are in senior level positions that are looking to start to transition before retirement into board positions. I've worked with like bank chairman, and I've worked with different executives at nonprofits that said, all right, I'm ending the near of my career, but I don't necessarily want to quit yet or retire. I want to transition into something else in the meantime. But when I work with them, the first step is really defining and coaching on, well, what does that look like that you're going to transition into? Because I always say it's not something that you're just qualified for. It's something that you're actually going to love, because this is a very big step in your career.
Yeah.
And the second way that I work with clients is on branding themselves. So yes, through a resume, yes, through cover letters and all of that, and just general interviewing, because it's, for example, it would be very different for me to go through a bank interview with technicals to go into a corporate strategy position. That's going to look very different. But it's also LinkedIn, right? Here we are. So making sure that you are not just having a great profile, but that I'm encouraging these clients to start conversations, to show up as the experts in their industry, so that, it's a lot of work when you're working full time to come home and apply to jobs that in general, but then that intimidate you, that you're making a transition. But how can we set you up for success so that people are naturally reaching out to you, or that you're applying to less jobs because you are so well branded for these positions that interviews are just flowing in? That's really the goal when I work with them.
Yeah, I will give you a huge shout out. So when we earlier this year did our Women's History Summit at Luminary, both online and virtual, Erin led a few sessions, particularly around your LinkedIn profile. And I think, first of all, that was one of the top rated sessions, and also registered, right? So I think there are a lot of people that feel like they just don't know where to start. And I love the fact that when you're talking about an individual client, like where they fit, right? This isn't like I just started and I'm kind of making a change. This is, I've built a bit of a career, I'm on the path, and now I'm trying to figure out how to transition. For those individuals, and I'll give you a real life example that happened yesterday. So we were in Washington, D.C. For the tour, for the National In This Together tour, part of our, that was our third stop. And we have a member, one of our members who's been a member since last year, seasoned executive, came from the financial services industry. And she just said, in the midst of all of this pandemic, I need to figure out what my next step is. So quit. And I was so excited to see her, Erin. And I said, so what's going on? And she said, well, I have this great opportunity, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know if I'm ready for it. I don't know if I can do all of the things that are on that job description. How often are you hearing that? And what would your advice be to someone that's in that, in that kind of transition mode? Because we know women right now, that is a huge population within our gender.
So I will tell you that I probably heard every time, especially on a conversation before we work together. And then when we just start diving in, because I present them, it's not just here's what you should transition to. Here's examples in different industries. Here's what it would look like. And the number one thing I always tell them is you shouldn't know every single thing on a job description, because if you did, then it's really not a promotion. It's really not a transition. And in addition to that, there would be no learning opportunity. So you would just be doing what you do every day. If you're taking any opportunity, even if it's not a transition, there better be something on that job description, whether it's a software or something that you don't know yet. Because why would you take the time and effort to transfer out of something to kind of just do the same thing? Or if you know everything, then it's probably beneath you. So you could take a higher salaried role. So I definitely hear that a lot. The other thing I say is with the change of work culture and how companies are trying to represent themselves, that there should be something in that job posting. So it usually goes back to tone in addition to benefits. So not just medical, not just a 401k, but what are they offering you?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you should be focusing on. But the tone to me lately, I think they're having different people actually write their job postings. They're kind of fascinating. Like there's a personality to them. And I think that sparks the people's interest, but it's a really good indicator of if that's going to be a good work culture. Because if a company's taking the time to show their personality and not just say, hey, here are the things that we need, yes or no, and check a box, then I don't know. That's somewhere that I would rather work than, just the check the box. Here's your skills. Do you not have them? So.
No, that's really, I get a lot of questions like, what do I look for when I'm looking for that new role, right? Obviously you want to see who you're connected to on LinkedIn and then ask them the questions, but really analyzing the job description and how it's written, I never would have thought of that. That's fantastic. And also maybe look at some old ones. How has that changed? As you are now kind of switching gears to the company side, right? Versus that individual, what are some of the challenges that the organizations are facing right now? One is obviously hiring the right talent and retaining of the talent. But I guess also from your personal perspective, culture change.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. And the companies that have approached me are usually surprised. It's surprising, but it's not, in the sense that, the companies that really should be doing it aren't reaching out first. Yeah. And that's not surprising. And the startups that are reaching out is interesting because some of them are starting to have an issue, or some of them are actually looking to just prevent the issue that could be happening. And so startups that are reaching out to me, they're saying that it's moved from verbal and sexual in person. So sexual harassment it's not that it's ended, it's more through a verbal harassment outlet because they're not in person. So it just makes it different, right? And then when it comes to how it's changed is now it's happening over Slack. So now it's that we're constantly plugged in. We have access to our phones or like something. And so they know that they can continue to harass or check-ins constantly. That's a big thing right now. And so I'm seeing that in startup culture, but they're very aware and wanting to change that. So that's the one thing that I'll hear. The second being is there's just a lack of team integration, team strategy, team culture, and that's coming in a remote setting. So they know that long-term down the road, that could lead to a lot of misunderstandings or people not being happy in the company. And so in that case, it's coming in and figuring out, well, how can we prevent these different things from taking place? And my biggest thing is making HR aware of the impact on their employees' mental health. I think that's something there's a fine line because HR's hands are tied, right? The company's paying their paycheck. But what happens when people like myself were harassed for years and I don't have anywhere to go other than my therapist's office? HR was not an ally at all. In fact, it probably made it worse. Yeah. And so how can we create a balance that companies are willing to listen to the employee? And in my personal opinion, I think that starts with third-party workplace investigators and just moving that entire issue of, and I'm sure HR would be on board, is not having to deal with that internally because there's always going to be some form of bias in some way.
So I think that third party piece is so interesting. In the prior episode on Goaldigger, Mark and Anna talked about this historically in a lot of in financial services, but in tech, this kind of control and command attitude of leaders, right? They want to control everything. And part of that is HR, right? HR is there to protect the company. That's at the core of what HR is there for. But how do you think a leader can actually get their arms around, yes, this is my HR function, but bringing in these third parties where they don't have the control?
I think first it starts with acknowledging the issue and awareness. You also have seasoned HR employees that pride themselves off of winning these cases, which for lack of a better word, I usually compare it's the lawyer who stands up for the murderer, right? These are people that know what's happening and they simply care more about their paycheck. And I understand their hands are tied and it's their job, but it's the company that has decided to make it at this level that their employee that's been here for 20 years can't create a balance. And so, yeah, it's kind of my goal long term for an impact, right, on what I'm going to leave on the world is finding a way that we can, every company, and maybe it's a law. I know you'd post a lot about the salary transparency law that's coming. Well, then maybe there's a law that issues like this, we have to have some type of third party workplace investigators come in to handle these issues. And I think that will significantly contribute to moving into a positive direction with workplace culture.
Yeah, I never thought about that because they do third-party investigations quite a bit for compliance issues and monetary issues. But when you think about harassment, gender discrimination, racial discrimination, it's usually, as you said, handled by HR. And so that does require a huge shift from a cultural standpoint, and also ensuring that when they do bring in someone on the third party, that those results and those findings are actually looked at. It's funny. I not recently, but a month or two ago, watched the Uber biopic, whatever they call it. I can't remember. And how they brought in a third party. Right. And that was basically the board as well saying there's a lot of problems. We need to know what they are. Never thought that they would find so many, but the fact that they actually then followed up on it and put in practice, put in place those recommendations, as you think about personally, your experience, because your personal experience, your lived experience really led you to starting this company and ensuring that everyone is able to kind of live their whole self and have this passion, this purpose. Do you think the situation for you would have changed if they had brought in a third party?
Entirely, but I may have still left due to that. I think it's handling the issue so that the employee doesn't just get fired, but then I think it's also dealing with management. So not only is that third party workplace investigator going to come in and handle the issue, but are you going to reprimand senior management or fire them for what they've done and make it known? Yes, it would have been very different because every time I dealt with HR, I actually felt like I had two against one. And then that's a place you're supposed to go. There is nobody else. But I was, like the lone wolf against all of these people that had been there for 20 years. In the second situation, possibly, but then I also wouldn't want to be in a workplace situation where I was
the pariah.
If I'm a victim of sexual harassment, right, I wouldn't want to make sure that person is still down the hall. And so I think it's a third party and HR coming together because talent and development is still going to be internal. So how do we have a workplace investigator come in, look at it from a fair point of view, prevent lawsuits? That's a huge one. And then say, okay, well, for our employee retention purposes, who are we going to keep on our team? Who's going to, ensure that we don't have to continuously hire a workplace investigator because that's also an expense for the company. So thinking logically and as a team, I think would really help a lot of organizations.
Yeah. Logic is always, is common sense, right? So it's been how long? Less than 2 years since you started the company?
It's 2 years this month, actually.
Really?
So exactly 2 years. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
You talk a lot about impact and again, I've been able to listen to you with at least our community at Luminary and your community at Luminary. But what's the goal for you in the business, right? Not just building the business, but more importantly for you as a leader.
Yeah. So for me, it's and why I would continue to doing this is hearing the impact I'm making on people's lives. I mean, transition literally changes people's lives, and that's important to me. Working in a bank, I was helping companies make more money, or at least handling their financials, and same thing in a REIT. And now I get texts on a Friday that people landed an offer. Or they have 4 interviews this week, and they were unemployed, and they have 4 kids, and now they're going to be able to, give their family a better life because their salary has increased, or they're leaving a toxic work culture and their mental health has improved dramatically. For me, long term, and again, not just building the business, but the question is like, what's my impact at the end when it's my funeral and people are saying, what did Erin do? I really want to make sure that there's, I think we've already handled mental health resources, and that's being added to an extent. But I think it goes back to these third party work, a law around third party workplace investigators, that every company, and maybe it's based on their size, obviously, but that's somebody that has to come in when something severe is happening, right? So not just among employers, but if there's a management situation, whether it's verbal or sexual, and it's been happening for a continued amount of time, that just like the salary, it's transparency,
Yeah.
but we have to have these parties come in. And I've spoken with a lot of people that do that work. Canada's very on board with it. I think in the US, we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, Canada seems to be on board with, they're much more progressive than us on a lot of things, right? So our neighbors to the north, I agree. I mean, even just some of the things that they're doing around, even access to childcare, reproductive right, gun laws, which we won't get into. But so for you personally, right, how over the last 2 years has your life changed for the better? Because I mean, I get to see you quite regularly, at least walking around or in emails. But how would you share that experience?
A 360, and not just from from every perspective, from mental to health. I mean, I went and got blood tests, and my blood results are amazing now, where they were being questioned at 24 and 25 years old, when I was in really those stressful situations of what's going on. This shouldn't be happening. And it wasn't from eating habits. It wasn't from not working out. I've always kept up with those things, but it was simply from the stress. And I remember growing up, my mom always saying about different people she would know in stressful jobs that stress can kill you. And I saw that in my early 20s in blood tests. And now seeing on the other side of that and my doctor comparing the results, it's quite amazing. And from a mental perspective, it's such a relief. I mean, to be out of a place that I just cried, like I wasn't happy, coming from a place where my anxiety was so bad that leaving the house to go to work was a chore, and then having to come back home and knowing that I had to go back in the day. And I think a lot of the times people use the word Sunday scaries, and for me it was every day, not knowing what was going to happen, right? Who I was going to be harassed, how I was going to be touched that day, and how far was that going to be taken, and would somebody listen? What was going to happen on a next business trip, right? Like things that I had to worry about that nobody should have to worry about when, life and work is stressful enough. So for me, it's amazing. I mean, it's such a transformation. And that's why I create LinkedIn content around it. I work with clients that can relate to that are in those situations that they feel stuck, and they're very aware that there is something better on the other side. They just need help and support getting there.
Yeah, I think the word I would use about you is brave. I mean, there's a million other adjectives I could use, but I think one, brave enough to kind of make that choice, two, brave enough to kind of lean into what you wanted to do and creating this company, but also continuing of being brave around talking about this, right? Talking about harassment, talking about third party, calling companies out and saying, this is what you need, right? That takes a brave voice. And you've really, at least I think, and I might be biased because I didn't know you in your former life, but we shared some stories together, is finding your voice now is like the voice is louder. It's positive. It's both physical health and mental health. So as we kind of wrap it up, as far as advice to those women and or men, or any gender that are feeling, how do I find my voice?
So the biggest thing I'll say is, if you ever feel like you're being put down in any way, or your confidence is no longer there because somebody's taken that away from you, it's time to leave. A resume break is okay. A gap is okay. LinkedIn has added a career break feature within the last couple months, if even that, which I think is a huge step in the right direction. It's literally acknowledging that it is okay because we've added this feature. And um, when you feel like you're at your breaking point, to leave before it gets worse, I think the effect on mental health is something that people ignore. And then they don't get help. I waited for a long time because I never had anxiety. I never felt like this. I didn't, there's such a stigma around like therapy and medication, and I can't do that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to put that on a job application. None of the above. Get help when you need it. Get out of a situation when you need it. There are resources to help you. Like I know people at Luminary who worked there in the meantime and networked with people, and building a network starting on day one. I feel like when you get out of college, or grad school, there's a lot of pressure around get the job, get the salary, and stay there and go to a happy hour for work. Well, when you're going to happy hour for your own company, you see those people every day anyway. You're having lunch with them. That's technically networking, but you need to find organizations and people of not just your age and not just your race and not just your industry, that you start to build a really strong network, because those people will be there to catch you when something doesn't work out. And then you're not stuck. That's the biggest things I tell when people are saying, when I'm working on a resume, like, what should I be doing in the meantime? And I'm saying, build your network. Schedule informational interviews, get on there and start networking with people. And, it's okay to reach out to somebody and ask them, I just want to ask you about your job at this company, your experience in the industry. Start doing that now, no matter what age you are, because you never know what's going to happen. In my situation, I was very happy in a company for a year, and then management switched, and that changed everything for me. And you don't know if that could happen. So, best thing is be prepared and work on your own self. Like there's a lot of inner work and there's mindset shifts that I think when I was in corporate, I just didn't even know existed. And then diving in the entrepreneur world, there's so much awareness of this, and learning about yourself a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah.
I love that. I think at 47, I probably need to do that too. Learn about myself a little bit more. I think we don't take time, right? So Erin, where can people, I know you're super active on LinkedIn, so follow Erin Anderson on LinkedIn, where we're at today, but where else can people find you?
Yeah, on Instagram, I'm at the same. It's just Your Brand Networker. Those are the two best places to reach me. I'm always open for a message or a conversation, and would love to chat further. I do have a career transition webinar coming up next week, and it's in my, there's a link in my profile. It's free if you'd like to attend, and I would love to see and meet you there.
Yeah, and I will wholeheartedly recommend you can also go on Erin's and schedule a Calendly.
Yeah.
So go on her LinkedIn. It's a wealth of information, also thought leadership in everything that you're doing, Erin. So number one, thank you for doing what you're doing. I think it couldn't have come at a better time, to be quite honest, right? Given what's happening in the world, especially for women, but more importantly, what you're putting back in the world. So you took a terrible experiences and are changing them for the better, not just for yourself, for so many other people. And proud to have you in our Luminary community, but also call you friends. So thank you for joining us on Goaldigger. Everyone, stay tuned next week. We will have Vanessa Blanco, senior business consultant at JP Morgan, talking about small business and finding their voices. But Erin, thank you and have a great weekend.
You too.
All right, take care.
Bye.